What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm your host, JT. I know a lot of y'all like me this past weekend. We're tuned into the NCAA tournament. And be honest with me, how bad is your bracket looking right now? Because I got an accuracy of 32.4%. Nearly every team that I picked to make it to the Sweet 16 got sent home early. I know that UConn wasn't that good throughout the regular season, but I at least thought that they could upset Florida. I know a lot of y'all probably feel otherwise, but one thing about me, I'm never going to count out the heart of a champion. They fought hard, but it wasn't good enough. Arkansas upset St. John's. I had St. John's making it to the Final Four. Like, the only team that looks like a smart pick was me picking Michigan to win the national championship, and they got Auburn coming up. But let's talk some football, man, and particularly the NFL, because I saw Steelers veteran Cam Heyward make some intriguing remarks on the Rich Eisen show, saying that the Steelers are in a state of urgency. And I feel like these comments are foreshadowing the expectations that's to come with a big move the Steelers are about to make to improve their quarterback position, to attempt to end their 8-year playoff drought. NFL free agency is somewhat over. Technically, it never is over. But I want to break down teams that have improved the most after the first big wave of free agency signings. These are teams that have kind of put themselves in the Super Bowl conversation now after free agency, or teams that have positioned themselves to go from either worst to first in their division possibly. The New York Giants are bringing famous Jameis to the Big Apple. We'll dive into how good he could be if he ends up being the starter. Is he going to end up being a mentor for whoever they choose to draft with the third overall pick at QB? And I saw that the 49ers the 49ers sign Mac Jones, and it had me thinking of two players from the 2021 NFL draft that their careers have not panned out the way that a lot of us thought they would. And there's a huge lesson that we can learn from both of these two players. And the Patriots, one of their high-ranking executives revealed their plans for the 4th overall pick. Before we dive into it, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Amazon. Links to the podcast are down in the pinned comment and description down below. And let's dive into it. Cam Heyward said that the Steelers are in a state of urgency on the Rich Eisen show. And these comments, to me, foreshadow the high expectations that's to come with the big move the Steelers are about to make, which is eventually signing Aaron Rodgers. And hopefully, with bringing in Aaron Rodgers, there's a chance the Steelers can end their 8-year playoff drought. Guys like TJ Watt, Mika Fitzpatrick, and Cam Heyward, they aren't getting any younger. As a matter of fact, Cam Heyward is about to play his 15th season on the Steelers. And despite him getting up there in age, the guy only continues to get better. But with Cam Heyward, TJ Watt, and Mika Fitzpatrick, their careers winding down, they want to get some hardware on their finger. And to do that, you got to start winning some of these playoff games. And Cam Heyward, with these comments, it tells me, hey, Mike Tomlin, it's put up or shut up. We're getting tired of all the rah-rah speeches. We're getting tired of all of the motivational talk. Talk is cheap. We need to start backing it up on the field. And here's the thing when it comes to Mike Tomlin. It's so easy to scream the Steelers need to fire him. But you have to understand that when you have a head coach that has been with a franchise as long as what Mike Tomlin has, same thing with John Harbaugh, there's going to be a stretch where they plateau. And, postseason success is hard to come by. John Harbaugh almost got fired. If it wasn't for Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh probably isn't the head coach of the Ravens at the moment. Mike Tomlin has been able to overachieve over these last 4 or 5 years despite having below average quarterback play. He has the best win-loss record out of any head coach right now with the backup quarterback. So with Mike Tomlin being able to win with backup quarterbacks and even guys that are his starters not being no better than the level of a backup quarterback, imagine what he could do with Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers is not washed up. And to me, the Steelers signing Aaron Rodgers gives the Steelers a fighting chance to win the AFC this year. What is the worst season that the Steelers are going to get out of Mike Tomlin? 9-8, 10-7. If that's what the floor is every single year for Pittsburgh, what's the ceiling if Mike Tomlin is given a quarterback that is at least above average? Which I believe Aaron Rodgers is at this stage of his career. Obviously, he isn't as good as what he used to be, but you cannot tell me that Aaron Rodgers is one of the worst quarterbacks in the league. He easily would be the third best quarterback in the AFC South or the second best quarterback in the AFC South right now. He's better than Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones, whoever ends up starting for them. He's better than Trevor Lawrence. He's better than Tua. And I'll probably take him over Justin Fields, whoever the Jets have starting that quarterback. Like, you guys get my point. There is a lot worse that the Steelers can do at quarterback than Aaron Rodgers. Bringing back Russell Wilson probably would make me consider changing teams. I cannot watch another down the Steelers football with Russ in that quarterback. Aaron Rodgers was 7th in the NFL in touchdowns last year with 28. He showed the ability to still have really good accuracy, a really nice deep ball. Russell Wilson is not as good as what Aaron Rodgers is. Despite Aaron Rodgers being 42 years old, he still is a top 15 quarterback right now. And for Mike Tomlin, having top 15 quarterback play now gives you a fighting chance come playoff time. If Aaron Rodgers can go vintage like how he used to look a few years ago back when he was with the Packers. Remember, before he joined the Jets, like, he had one MVP. So it wasn't like the guy has had 4 or 5 years where he has just looked washed. Pittsburgh is banking on Aaron Rodgers being able to bring a similar impact to their squad that Brett Favre had with the Minnesota Vikings. Aaron Rodgers doesn't have to carry Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's offensive line isn't as bad as what you think. Zach Frazier, their starting center from this past season, was a first-team selection when it came to all rookies. And when you have a good center, the majority of the times you end up having a pretty good offensive line because the center is the quarterback of that unit. They have an offensive tackle that they drafted in the first round last year out of Washington who didn't play due to injuries. He's going to be back healthy. And they had a ton of other injuries that they suffered on the offensive line that they had to work through. But they acquired DK Metcalf, and they probably are going to end up getting a really good running back out of the draft as well with how loaded this draft class is at that position. So if anything, with the Steelers, this is the best team that they've had in a very long time in terms of talent. Aaron Rodgers is going to be throwing to one of the best receiving duos in the league. It doesn't get no better than DK Metcalf and George Pickens. Now, yeah, there's concerns about how the personalities are going to mesh, but Mike Tomlin got a Hall of Fame career out of Antonio Brown. He got more out of Antonio Brown than what any other team was able to get out of him after he left Pittsburgh. So if he can deal with the head case that was Antonio Brown after he took that big hit from Vontaze Burfict, which I think gave him CTE, then he can definitely manage a locker room with the personalities of DK, George Pickens, and Aaron Rodgers. This team is all in on trying to win this year. Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he does have a huge ego, and yeah, his political views probably turn off a lot of folks, but he wants to end his career off on a high note. He wants to win just as much as Cam Heyward wants to win. Yeah, he doesn't have the amount of equity with the Steelers franchise is what some of the veterans like Cam and TJ Watt do. But at the same time, this is somebody who is perceived to be one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. And to be honest with you, when he retires in 10 years from now, when he's in the Hall of Fame, I'm not really going to remember how his time with the Jets went. To be honest with you, when you have a poorly coached team and bad ownership, it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback you are, you're going to have a hard time being able to win. There were several games that the Jets lost last year due to poor coaching when you have a bunch of special teams errors, missed field goals. That's a sign of bad coaching. You know, poor clock management cost them as well. Aaron Rodgers had the stinkers. Let's not get it twisted. But with the Steelers on a team that always wins at least 9-10 games, if he can play at least above average level, which he definitely is capable of, the Steelers got a chance of being able to win a playoff game or two. You don't always need great quarterback play. You just need somebody who's good enough to get the job done. And that's what Aaron Rodgers has the ability to do. If Mike Tomlin can win with below average quarterback play, what can he do with Aaron Rodgers? And that's why I've never been somebody that's always screamed the Steelers need to fire Mike Tomlin. If Mike Tomlin had a quarterback like a Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson, how differently do we perceive the Pittsburgh Steelers? If Sean McDermott didn't have Josh Allen, how good of a coach is he? So there aren't too many coaches that have been able to do what Mike Tomlin has done for so many years. And with the Steelers having a sense of urgency, it's understandable. If there ever was a time where the Steelers possibly could really think about moving on from Mike Tomlin, it probably is after this upcoming season. Because eventually you get to a point where when you get a guy like a DK Metcalf and you give him a new extension, that's not just a move that you're making for the long-term interests of the team, but you're also making that move to bolster your chances of being able to win now. So with the move the Steelers made to get DK Metcalf, they really aren't that aggressive when it comes to years past making trades. They normally don't give out that big of a contract to a guy they just traded for. Normally they try to get guys that are either older veteran players in free agency, like Joe Hayden. They just signed Darius Slay as well. They don't normally trade for guys like a DK Metcalf that's in the prime of their career and re-em up. And the Steelers got a really good eye for receiver. They draft pretty well. So I think this is a really good situation where maybe we could see the Steelers finally win a playoff game, end their drought without a playoff win. Aaron Rodgers does a really good job taking care of the football. As good as what Big Ben was, let's not act like he always played his best football in the postseason near the tail end of his career. Against the Jaguars, he had hella turnovers. Against the Cleveland Browns, he threw like 1 million interceptions in the first quarter. So how many of those playoff losses can you truly blame on Mike Tomlin without holding Big Ben for just as much responsibility in those L's? Because Mike Tomlin is a defensive-minded coach. He's the head coach. Big Ben at that point pretty much is running the offense. So a good amount of those losses fall on him. But with a guy like Aaron Rodgers that always does a pretty good job taking care of the football, somebody that's going to be motivated to go out on top, with the locker room that also has a bunch of older guys who are looking to end their careers on top, this could be a really good story that I feel has a really good ending for Aaron Rodgers in terms of how his career is going to pan out. Now, free agency technically isn't over because guys are still getting signed, but there are a few teams that right now, after the first big wave of free agency signings, have really improved to the point where they put themselves either in position to go from being a non-playoff team to being in the postseason, to the other batch of teams that went from being playoff teams to now Super Bowl contenders after what they just did early in free agency. Starting off with the Denver Broncos. You bring in former 49ers linebacker Dre Greenlaw, safety Talanoa Hufanga, who was a former first-team All-Pro in 2022. When these two guys are healthy and they're on the field, they're arguably the best at their positions. Hufanga is a top 5 safety, maybe better, and Dre Greenlaw is one of the best overall linebackers in the league in terms of being able to play both the run and pass very well. He only played in 2 games last year due to a torn Achilles that he suffered in the Super Bowl. But these 2 signings make the Denver Broncos defense incredibly better. And this was already a defense that had a good amount of talent. Pat Surtain, Defensive Player of the Year. You only had holes at linebacker, and you fill that by bringing in Dre Greenlaw. And with how well this defense played at a top 10 level, they probably could have a top 3, top 5 defense this year with the signings of Greenlaw, Hufanga, and let's not forget about the addition of Evan Ingram. He's going to fill that joker spot for Sean Payton. That's like the versatile player that can play multiple different positions. He's probably going to be lining up in the slot, lining up at fullback, also lining up in his traditional spot at tight end. Good after the catch. He gives Bo Nix another weapon to work with along with Courtland Sutton. So the Broncos, to me right now, I think either them or the Broncos or them or the Chargers are going to win the AFC West. The Chiefs have dominated this division for so long. I think right now it's not a hot take to say that the Broncos are a better team than Kansas City right now, at least on paper. The Washington Commanders. Now, they didn't really make any free agent signing that blew me away, but I do like the trades that they made for Deebo Samuel and Laremy Tunsil. I don't care what Houston Texans fans have to say about all of Laremy Tunsil's penalties. The guy was one of the best pass blocking tackles in the league, and it's hard to find an elite offensive tackle in today's NFL. I'll take a guy that has hella penalties but doesn't allow my quarterback to get sacked versus a guy that just allows my quarterback to be a practice dummy back there. The Houston Texans took a big L getting rid of Laremy Tunsil, and the Washington Commanders essentially got a guy that gives them 2-3 additional wins. When you have an elite left tackle, it makes your offensive line tremendously better. I don't think enough football fans understand how hard it is to get elite level play out of what is the majority of times your quarterback's blind side. So to get a guy like Laremy Tunsil, I don't care about the age. The age doesn't matter. Trent Williams is one of the oldest players in the league, and he still is considered the best at his position, and he's paid like it as well because of how much of a high demand guys like Laremy Tunsil are in because of how well they play at that position that doesn't produce a lot of elite level players at that spot. And with you getting a Deebo Samuel, going to Cliff Kingsbury was the best spot for him. You have somebody who, he's not on the same level as Kyle Shanahan, but in terms of creativity, finding ways to get him involved the proper way, because Deebo Samuel isn't the kind of player that you can just plug and play into any offense. You got to somewhat scheme him into your offense. You have to put him in different positions. You have to find ways to scheme him the ball. You got to find a way to manufacture touches in a sense. So that's why he's not your traditional receiver. He's not a good route runner. He doesn't have a great skill set that you see out of a traditional wide receiver. He just overall is a good football player. But a guy like Cliff Kingsbury, he'll be able to have him at wide back. He'll be able to play him in the slot. He'll be able to find ways to get the most out of Deebo Samuel. And I think that Deebo Samuel still has a few good years left. The New England Patriots, they have gone from one of the worst teams in the league to now a playoff team. You improve your offensive line. You get offensive tackle, Morgan Moses. You sign Garrett Bradbury. None of these signings are going to blow anybody away. But, with how bad the offensive line was for New England last year, beggars can't be choosers. Any improvement, you got to be okay with. And defensively, yeah, you might have overpaid for Milton Williams just a tad bit. Under Mike Vrabel, I expect him to be a really good player. I'm hoping that you can get Barmore back. If you can get him back and he can play football again, you're going to have a monster 1-2 defensive tackle, nose tackle tandem, however they want to play him. You got Carlton Davis, who he was really underrated in Detroit last year. He was really good during that playoff game against Washington. Everybody was getting burnt and cooked but him. Harold Landry, he only had a 4% pass rush win rate last year in Tennessee, but he still had like 8 or more sacks. And he isn't the same player that he once was prior to that ACL tear that he suffered a few seasons ago, but he's better than anybody the Patriots have had these last couple of years getting after the quarterback. They were dead last in sacks per game last year. So you get a guy like a Harold Landry, yeah, he might not be able to give you 12 plus sacks, but he can at least give you 10 max. And getting Robert Spillane, he's been on the come up these last couple of years since leaving Pittsburgh. He's a really good tackler. His pass coverage has improved as well. The Patriots, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up winning the AFC East. We've seen teams every year. We have somebody that possibly goes from worst to first, and the Bears could be that team. But also, the Patriots could be that team as well. But the Chicago Bears, I really love what they've done. And if I had to pick between either them or the Patriots to have the best shot at going from worst to first in their division, I probably lean the Chicago Bears. You got the better quarterback in Caleb Williams, who had that generational label coming out of the draft last year, and he was set up to fail. Awful coaching staff, bad offensive line. Now you got somebody that actually knows what he's doing in Ben Johnson. And Ben Johnson, he's supposed to be like the second coming of Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan. And they went really hard on improving the offensive line. They got Caleb Williams, some new bodyguards. He has presidential protection now. Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, an offensive guard. You signed center Joe Dowman, who is pretty solid. So this is a way better offensive line that you have now than what you had around this time last year. And with what you already have to work with at wide receiver, Roma Dunze, DJ Moore, if you drive Ashton Genty or another running back, with how good your defense is going to be. Plus, let's not forget you signed Grady Jarrett. Yeah, he is a little bit washed, but with what they already have on that D-line with Montez Sweat, Grady Jarrett should fit in perfectly. And I think that defense with Dennis Allen calling the plays is still going to be as good as what they were with Matt Eberflus, which is a top 10 unit, maybe better. So I think that the Bears, not only could they go from worst to first, but there's a chance that maybe they make it to the NFC Championship year one under Ben Johnson. This is a already made team. When Matt Eberflus went into last year, the expectation from this fan base was to at least win 9 games, and this was a playoff caliber roster. So to me, I wouldn't be surprised if we see the Bears make a deep run in the playoffs with these moves that they made in free agency. And then you got the Los Angeles Chargers. You bring in Mekhi Becton. I was wondering where he was going to land because that season that he had in Philadelphia, when you go to Stoutland University and you leave, there's a good chance you end up falling off. But he's going to the second best place possible you could go to if you're an offensive lineman playing for Jim Harbaugh. He's going to be able to maintain that level of performance out of Mekhi Becton moving forward that we saw to him in Philadelphia. And now you have one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. You already struck gold with Joe Alt. You have Rashawn Slater on the other side playing your other tackle spot. So your biggest area of need was guard, and you fill that with Mekhi Becton. Plus, you still have the draft rolling around. And after the Mekhi Becton signing, you bring in Najee Harris. I think he's going to be really good behind that offensive line. The problem with Najee Harris is that he hasn't been what you expect out of a first-round pick. You expect way more explosiveness. You expect Saquon Barkley, B. John Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs. You expect a running back that is a lead athlete with elite twitch, and Najee Harris is kind of the polar opposite of that. He's a better athlete than most for running backs his size, but nowhere the athlete he was at Alabama when he was hurling over guys. And plus, with him somewhat being hindered by the Steelers' inability to get the offensive line right. You put him behind one of the best offensive lines in the NFL, he could easily go for 1,200, 1,300 yards. He is really good after contact. He's always been one of the top backs at making guys miss. He just doesn't make you miss with elusiveness. He's just going to run you over. So with how good the Chargers are up front, Najee Harris could be a really good pickup that you get for a pretty good deal. And, they signed a bunch of other, mid-range free agents. You bring in Dante Jackson. He's coming off probably the best year of his career. I think he'll be a pretty good pickup for that secondary. Dante Jackson is a really good second corner. He's not a cornerback one, but he's a really good second option. So these are the teams that have improved the most post-free agency. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below on this list. The New York Giants are bringing famous Jameis to the Big Apple. At least with Jameis Winston, your offense is going to be somewhat serviceable. Yeah, he throws a lot of interceptions, but he throws a lot of touchdowns as well. And Malik Neighbors, even if the New York Giants are losing a lot of games with Jameis Winston in that quarterback, he's not going to be frustrated with them. Every receiver that plays with Jameis Winston, their stats get boosted tremendously. I don't know how many of you guys remember Brashad Perryman. He was a former first-round pick by the Baltimore Ravens, but he's one of the biggest first-round busts ever for wide receivers. But he had the best season of his career when he played with Jameis Winston when they were in Tampa Bay. And Jerry Jeudy was a guy that was perceived to be a major disappointment, a former first-round pick. Well, they make the switch from Deshaun to Jameis Winston after the injury, and then all of a sudden, you see Jerry Jeudy have the best season of his career. There's a reason why Mike Evans has had so many consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. Who do you think was responsible for the first 4 or 5 batch of those? It was Jameis Winston, because he just force feeds guys the ball. He's super aggressive. And if the New York Giants do roll with Jameis Winston as their starting quarterback this year, you are going to be able to win a few games with him. You are at least going to be interesting. If you can only allow Jameis Winston to throw 24 times a game, no more than that, you can win games with that. The more you ask Jameis Winston to throw the football, the more you increase the chances of him ultimately turning the football over. But if you don't remember, in 2021, Sean Payton's final season in New Orleans, they were 5-1 on top of the NFC South until Jameis Winston suffered a season-ending injury against Tampa Bay. But during that season, before the injury, Jameis Winston had the best touchdown-interception ratio in the league, 14-2. He outplayed Aaron Rodgers the first week of the season, which Aaron Rodgers won MVP that year. Jameis has shown the ability to be a capable starting quarterback, and you can limit the turnovers as long as you reduce the amount of volume that you give him throwing the ball. You already have a really good running back in Tracy. We know how much of a beast Malik Neighbors is, but let's not forget about Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, the New York Giants aren't a team that's completely devoid of talent. If they can just get some decent quarterback play in there and they can improve that offensive line somewhat, with Jameis Winston, they could make some noise with him. Now, the other option is that you're bringing in Jameis Winston to most likely be the mentor for Shedeur Sanders, who you probably are going to draft 3rd overall if the Browns end up going just with Abdul Carter, which it looks like that probably is going to be the plan. They draft him and they trade for Kirk Cousins. But Jameis is a great mentor for a young quarterback like Shedeur. If you want to start him, like, Jameis Winston isn't going to be a poor sport about it. He's going to support him. He's going to be a good mentor for him. And also, if the season goes left for the Giants, Jameis Winston is one of those high-character guys that he's still going to be able to keep the morale high in the locker room. Guys aren't completely going to be tapped out of the season with Jameis Winston. He's going to be giving those crazy pregame speeches, getting guys amped up. signing Jameis Winston was a really underrated move by the Giants. I think that leadership in the NFL is really overrated. I don't really think that it matters that much, at least when it comes to backups. But a guy like Jameis Winston really can mean a lot when you have a GM and a head coach that's on the hot seat. There's just a lot of pressure. There's a lot of intensity in that organization right now. It's good just to have a guy like Jameis Winston who can lighten the mood from time to time. When Kyle Pitts was coming out of Florida in the 2021 NFL draft, he was hyped up to be this can't-miss generational tight end. And normally, you're not supposed to draft a tight end high in the draft, especially in the top 5. But Kyle Pitts was different because he had a lot of versatility to where he not only was a tight end, but he could play slot receiver, outside receiver, because he was just a mismatch. He's 6'6", 245 pounds. He ran 4.4 at his pro day. I mean, this guy was an absolute freak show at the University of Florida. And his rookie season with the Falcons was really promising. 68 catches, over 1,000 yards, 15 yards per catch as well. And he was a Pro Bowler. But ever since his rookie season, his production has dropped. He consistently is always the biggest disappointment in fantasy football. Yeah, I brought into the Kyle Pitts fantasy football hype for about 2 straight years in a row. And I've been incredibly disappointed at the end of every single year. And Arthur Smith, now the offensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers, I know Falcons fans want to forget about him, and he did a poor job of getting the most out of the star players that the Falcons had on offense, but he was on to something when he continued to give Jonnu Smith more reps than Kyle Pitts. You see, what has gone wrong for Kyle Pitts entering the 5th year of his career is that, for one, he was hyped up to be this athletic monster. There were some thoughts that if he moved from tight end and became a full-time wide receiver, he could have been like the second coming of Calvin Johnson. But in the NFL, I don't know if it's injuries or just with the bump up in athleticism, but he just doesn't look as dominant. He doesn't look like a man amongst boys like he did playing at Florida. And also, his route running isn't that polished neither. And his lack of polished route running is why he doesn't have the ability to play more receiver, because he can't get off the line that well. He doesn't create a lot of separation. And it's one thing just to be big and run fast, but if you just aren't technically refined, it's just hard for you to live up to this hype of being this positionalist unicorn. Kyle Pitts at his best probably was Jimmy Graham on crack. But Jimmy Graham had the ability to just bully defenders around. That's what made him such a huge mismatch. But Kyle Pitts, what's missing in his game is the fact that he isn't as physical as what you need to be playing the tight end position. One of the big knocks on him coming out of Florida was that if you needed him to block in any form when it came to run blocking, chipping a defender, you were going to get pretty much nothing out of him. And when you put him on the field, it's pretty obvious what you're going to do with him. You're going to throw the football. And having him on the field gives the defense an easy tell what's coming. Because if you're going to run the ball with Kyle Pitts on the field, you're definitely not running it to his side because he's a liability in run blocking. And there's questions about his effort. There's some people that even question his love for the game of football. Now, I don't like to question players' effort, but there are times when it feels like Kyle Pitts runs half-effort routes. Doesn't look like he's giving it his all. Sometimes he has concentration drops. Like, remember when Michael Penix made his debut against the New York Giants and he led them on the drive that could have been a touchdown, but it slipped through Kyle Pitts' fingers, or like he fumbled it or something like that? Like, Kyle Pitts, he's not terrible. I consider him a bust just because he hasn't lived up to the hype. But he still is a serviceable tight end. He's like average to above average. But a huge issue with Kyle Pitts and a huge problem with these positionless players or these hybrid players that can play tight end, fullback, a little bit of receiver is that when you spend so much time in practice during your development in college where you're splitting reps in practice between two positions, it takes away from meaningful practice time that you could be using to hone and really master your position. And same thing kind of goes for Isaiah Simmons. Now, although he plays on the defense side of the football, he still kind of fits the mold for what Kyle Pitts kind of was. Isaiah Simmons was supposed to be the same way. He was supposed to be this positionless unicorn that can play so many different positions. Remember, he played linebacker, edge rusher, safety, corner. Well, yeah, being a jack of all trades player sounds nice, but if you're good at a bunch of things but not great at a bunch of things, and you don't really get that development in practice, once you get to the NFL, you have a hard time adapting because you're not really good at anything. So it's like it's hard to really get into a scheme that can really maximize your talents when you know it's just hard for you to really find out what you truly do best. And that's what went wrong with Isaiah Simmons, and that's what's going wrong with Kyle Pitts. You have somebody that is an all-time tweener because it's like he probably should play wide receiver since he isn't that good blocking for tight end standards. But at the same time, even though he runs 4.4, he no longer moves at that speed anymore when you watch him in game. So therefore, although he's a bigger receiver, he's going to get jammed on the line of scrimmage often, or you're going to see somebody who doesn't really create a lot of separation on their routes. So Kyle Pitts, he still can be a productive football player, but going into this season coming up, if he doesn't end up, really breaking through, I don't think he ever is. Sometimes you have tight ends that it takes a while for them to really get going. Tight end is probably the most difficult position in the NFL when it comes to making the transition from the collegiate game to the pro game due to how much you have to know. You got to know pass protections, run blocking protections as well, or not run blocking protections, but you got to know what you got to do when it comes to your run blocking assignments. And then you got to know all of the different route trees, the different route combinations for you being a tight end. Plus, if you're going to end up playing a little bit of receiver as well. Kyle Pitts, I don't think it's completely over for him yet. But as far as being, this generational tight end prospect, this season is going to tell us a lot coming up in 2025 about, just if it's time to label him a bust. Because I'm not ready to label him a bust completely. Vernon Davis kind of had a similar career to what Kyle Pitts has had. He also had like the same prototype, mismatch. You could kind of move him all around the offense as a versatile chess piece in a sense. But, his career didn't get going until he got to, probably like his latter stages. So for Kyle Pitts, who knows? Maybe he's able to put it all together. Maybe they trade him away. But he definitely had me believing that he was going to be an all-time great with how he played at Florida, how he tested during his pro day. Just don't see any of that translating up to this point in his career. The New England Patriots, one of their high-ranking executives has revealed what their plans are with the 4th overall pick in the upcoming NFL draft. Their vice president said that they plan to draft the best player available, and it's pretty obvious who that is. Let's just go through the scenarios real quick. Cam Heyward is a lock at 1 to the Tennessee Titans. It looks like Abdul Carter probably goes to the Browns at 2, but if not, you probably don't get Abdul Carter. He probably goes to the Giants if they don't get Shador. So that means that Travis Hunter is the best player on the board at that point, unless you plan on taking Ashton Jeanty. Travis Hunter makes a lot of sense for New England. For one, Drake May needs a playmaker. with them signing Carlton Davis in free agency, I don't think they plan on drafting Travis Hunter to be a full-time corner. They probably are going to be looking at him as a receiver, as they should, because he's the best wide receiver in this draft class. He's a better route runner than what he's given credit for. He has really great hands, and he's just a playmaker. You put the ball in his hands, and great things seem to happen. And a lot gets made of him winning the Heisman. You know, some folks like to discredit him, saying that he didn't go up against the best competition. He was the number 1 rated player coming out of high school. The guy is an insane athlete. It doesn't matter what level of competition you play. To play both sides of the football, I'm finna route you up on one side of the ball and then come shut you down on the next drive on the opposite side of the football. You have to be a different kind of athlete to have that level of stamina and that level of cardio. And if you are trying to discredit how impressive of an accomplishment that is, then you're kind of disrespecting the game of football. Because for Travis Hunter to be this good at both positions is incredibly rare. Normally you have guys that, like Charles Woodson, play both sides of the football, but Charles Woodson wouldn't have been the first-round wide receiver if he would have came out as a wideout. That's how good Travis Hunter is. He's not in the same class as guys like Charles Woodson and Jabril Peppers because he was elite on both sides of the ball. The New England Patriots were unable to come away with any of the top options in free agency at receiver. And at this point, you don't really have any reliable option in the passing game outside of Pop Douglas. Now, I do like Javon Baker a lot, but you know, at this point, you kind of got no choice but to draft Travis Hunter because you need to give Drake May at least somebody that can be a security blanket, and that's what Travis Hunter is. He caught damn near every pass that Shedeur threw to him. It didn't matter if he was double covered, triple coverage. This is just a guy that makes plays, and he's one of those prospects that you look at as somebody that can come in right out the gate and be an instant all-pro player for the New England Patriots. And that's what you need if you're a team that has a new head coach. You need somebody that can come in right out the gate with you having a new head coach. You smash a home run on the draft pick. You get somebody that already is an all-pro that fans can get excited for. Somebody that is going to help you come and win games. That's the kind of player that Travis Hunter is. That's why, despite him being a corner/wide receiver, he's worth being a top 5 pick, even though you normally don't draft players like him this high. But somebody like Travis Hunter is somebody that not only is a great football player, but a high character guy. You know, what he went through with his girl, that gives me more reason to want to draft a guy like him. It shows that he's an overall good dude. You know, he gave NIL money of his to teammates that needed it. Mike Vrabel is all about culture. I don't view Mike Vrabel as a defensive coach. I've always viewed him as a motivator and a culture builder. And having somebody like Travis Hunter who just has this high motor, there are just certain prospects that you look at and you know they're going to be great. Like Saquon Barkley. Just looking at him, you knew he was destined to be great. Something was just different about him. That's Travis Hunter. So for New England, if Travis Hunter's on the board, I think it's a no-brainer they end up taking him. You can't afford to pass on generational kind of players. Getting Travis Hunter is pretty much a safe guarantee in terms of somebody that isn't going to be a bust and somebody that right out the gate is going to make a big impact for you. With Travis Hunter having a high possibility of giving you an all-pro season, that does nothing but increase Drake May's chances for success in year 2, despite having to overcome a new coaching staff. Normally, when you have a quarterback that has to overcome multiple different coaching staff changes, they end up not being that good. But Drake May, with how much promise he showed, despite only having one receiver to throw to, now you give him Travis Hunter and Pop Douglas. You know, I think that's a formidable receiving core, especially with the improvements that they made on the offensive line. Now the Patriots offense has a fighting chance to be decent this year. You need a playmaker. You weren't able to get one in free agency. You're flirting with the idea of trading for Brandon Ayuk, who's coming off like 2 injuries and one. Like, just go ahead and draft Travis Hunter. Plus, he's way cheaper than any other option you would have gotten in free agency or that you could trade for. Anytime you have a quarterback that gets drafted high in the first round and they struggle early into their career, you have fans that refuse to admit that that quarterback might not have what it takes to ever be a capable starter in the league. And there's nothing wrong with moving on early. And Trey Lance taught the NFL a huge lesson when it comes to this, especially with the current situation that the Colts find themselves in with Anthony Richardson. You have somebody that coming out of North Dakota State, he didn't have a lot of experience. He was super athletic, but he was super raw. Not really that polished throwing the ball. He had a weird throwing motion, but the assumption was with him going to the 49ers, inheriting a great situation, being coached up by Kyle Shanahan, who is considered to be like a quarterback whisperer. Every quarterback that you put in his system automatically turns into gold. And with the 49ers having a team that was built to win now, sitting Trey Lance for a year, you thought would have been enough for him to end up reaching his full potential. But ironically, they just signed Mac Jones. And it's just a full circle moment because the guy that Kyle Shanahan initially wanted to draft when the 49ers gave up all those assets to attain the 3rd overall pick was Mac Jones. But he was told, oh, you can't draft a guy like Mac Jones that high. Mac Jones wasn't the most talented quarterback in that class. Didn't have a great arm. Wasn't a great athlete. But he was supposed to be this elite processor, really good at throwing with anticipation. And if you gave Mac Jones a good team and a good coaching staff, he could produce at a really high level. And that's the kind of quarterback that Kyle Shanahan is comfortable with. But he was told, when you trade up this high for a quarterback, you got to swing for the fences. And if you're as good as an offensive mind as what you're made out to be, you should be able to develop this guy. Same situation that Shane Steichen was in with the Indianapolis Colts. Remember, not only was he the offensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles when Jalen Hurts exploded for that MVP level season, but he also was Justin Herbert's offensive coordinator during his rookie year, which at that time was the best rookie season ever for a first-year quarterback. So Shane Steichen has a great reputation of being able to develop young quarterbacks. But unfortunately, even though Shane Steichen might be a really good X's and O's guy and really good developing quarterbacks, he might not be able to develop every quarterback that he inherits. And Anthony Richardson might be one of those. Same thing with Trey Lance in the San Francisco 49ers. Kyle Shanahan, despite him being one of the best offensive minds of this decade and him being a quote-quote quarterback whisperer, he was unable to develop Trey Lance. And it isn't because of Kyle Shanahan not being patient enough, but it's that they realized, him and John Lynch, early, that Trey Lance didn't have what it took to be a capable, functioning starting quarterback in the NFL. Some guys just aren't natural quarterbacks. When Trey Lance was coming out of high school, he was only recruited by like a handful amount of schools to play quarterback. His biggest offer, Minnesota, wanted him to play tight end. And with him only starting one season and one game at North Dakota State, which, you know, after that full season, that one lone game he played, he didn't look that good. And there's this belief that fans have that every quarterback can be developed. Not everybody in life can be successful at what they do. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Sometimes it's made for you, sometimes it's not. And the same thing goes for the quarterback position. Not every quarterback can be coached up into an elite quarterback. Sometimes being elite at what you do, you have to be born with it in a sense. Some quarterbacks just are naturally accurate. Now, certain quarterbacks can improve their accuracy over time, and if you go to the right system and you're in a situation like Lamar with the Ravens, you have a team that perfectly builds around you and is able to unlock your potential. But that's the thing. Guys like Josh Allen, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson, they're unicorns compared to guys like Anthony Richardson. You're more likely to find guys like Anthony Richardson, Malik Willis, than what you are to find the next Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen. These guys already were viewed as boom or bust prospects. So therefore, it's unrealistic to expect every quarterback that has similar physical traits to them to always pan out. Certain guys, just aren't able to put it all together in the NFL. And Anthony Richardson, he already wasn't really the greatest when he was coming out of Florida. And there are some Florida fans that would tell you that Anthony Richardson, he wasn't even good enough to be the starter. He should have been benched. So you already have somebody that doesn't have a lot of experience playing the quarterback position, and yet you start him early, and then he misses a whole year of development pretty much due to an injury that he sustains, and then you end up having to bench him again, ruining more time for him to develop. And then, when the guy is able to play, he isn't that good. He holds back the offense. Sometimes you got to know when to hold him, and sometimes you got to know when to fold him. Drafting a quarterback is like investing into a stock. Just because the stock has a lot of potential, when you see that stock plummeting early, just because you just bought it 2 days ago, if you see that thing rapidly dropping, how long are you going to continue to be patient until you end up going broke holding on to this stock? These coaches don't have 100 years to get it right. You only have about 2-3 seasons to start producing, and that's about it. And you don't have years to develop a quarterback. And certain quarterbacks just can't be developed. Anthony Richardson, Trey Lance, they don't look like natural quarterbacks. And especially when you watch Trey Lance in the preseason when he threw like 4 or 5 interceptions. That was the moment when all the Trey Lance defenders finally had no choice but to admit the guy just doesn't have what it takes to be a starting quarterback. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think that he could be a really good tight end. Same thing with Anthony Richardson. But playing quarterback is hard. I've talked to a few players that played quarterback at the college level, and they admit they have no business starting as freshmen due to everything that you need to know, from the audibles to protections, being able to diagnose coverages. There's a reason why a lot of rookie quarterbacks aren't ready to start right away. There's a lot that comes on your plate. But quarterback isn't always about physical traits. It's also a mental game. And for a guy like Anthony Richardson and Trey Lance, it's hard to teach them the mental game. It's hard to teach them how to throw the ball with anticipation. It's hard to teach them how to work the quick game. Certain things you just should already be built up as a quarterback to have. Josh Allen played at Wyoming, and he started for several years, but he didn't really have that good of a supporting cast. But Anthony Richardson is way worse than what Josh Allen is. At this point, Josh Allen already showed enough improvement to show that the Bills made a good draft pick with him. With Trey Lance, early on, you could see that, the 49ers messed up with him. He just wasn't ready to play. And then it went from him not being ready to play to him just not being able to be a good fit in this system. Kyle Shanahan runs one of the most complex offenses in the league. And for a guy like Trey Lance that already doesn't have a lot of experience playing the quarterback position, to be thrown into a situation where you're expected to win now, and you got to learn this complex offense, it just was more than he was going to be able to chew. And if he ever was going to be able to have a chance at having some success, it probably would have been with a worse franchise, because at least they would have been willing to be more patient.